Welcome to Field Notes Transformation. I'm Tara Marino. This is where we explore the science and the soul of what I call the unbecoming, the place where old identities fall away and something truer emerges. I've walked through collapse, addiction, codependency, and trauma, and each time, instead of breaking, I cracked open, and what emerged was healing, more nervous system regulation, a deeper awareness, and a spiritual awakening that rewrote my entire life from the inside out. Today, I work with leaders, practitioners, and seekers who are ready to shed who they've been and step into who they truly are. This is the messy, sacred middle. No masks, no bypassing, just truth, lived in the body, spoken from the heart. If you feel lost, take a breath. You are not broken, you are transforming. Welcome to the liminal. Let's begin. I'm super excited for this podcast. So Chris Odrosky is a friend and colleague of mine, and he's also a person in recovery from substance use disorder since October 6th, 2008. He's a peer recovery coach in Wayne County, recovery advocate, and proponent of multiple pathways to recovery, including secular pathways. He is on the CMHA Planning Committee and a board member for the Recovery Action Network. He's also a sober musician, Elvis impersonator, Batman aficionado, and comic book nut. I'm so excited for you to listen to this podcast. There's a lot to learn. I'm so excited to have you on today. I think, how long have we known each other, Chris?
It was, I forget the actual year, but it was that huge rally in DC.
Oh, yes.
So
We just had this
that's like,
conversation.
yeah. So I've been at my current location for 9 years. And before that, I was in Washtenaw County. And I believe that's when I still worked there when we went to this big rally and I met you through our friend Deb.
Yes. And that
That was also, coincidentally, that was also my first Uber. So
when you guys got left by the bus and it
I
was,
did, yeah.
oh, you did, yeah. And it was,
Yeah.
who was the one that, and she works over in Detroit still at the women's shelter. What is her name? She's an Detox specialist.
Yeah. Oh man, she would kill me if I forgot her name. Yeah, because she used to be with the D-Win.
Yeah.
Every time I'd see her, I would be like, "Hey, it's the lady that saved my life."
But yeah, so I remember, and yeah, so it's funny how time really does fly, and we've been working in this field and I would say we're becoming veterans in this field, and especially with our recovery journeys and how long you and I have been in recovery. And how long have you been in recovery for?
I've been in recovery since October 6th of 2008.
Okay, yeah, so we
So
started getting,
that's
yeah.
17, 18 years. And then almost exactly at my 2-year mark was when I got my first job in the field.
Oh,
It
wow.
was actually part of the interview was like funny because there was two people that weren't in recovery interviewing me, but they had this requirement that if you weren't a social work student specifically or a counseling student, then you would go into this other category and be a person in recovery to be a program assistant for this house that was a treatment center. And it was a small program. They were like, you have to have 2 years sober for the position. I said, I'll be 2 years in 2 weeks. And they were like, and they looked at each other and they thought about it. And I said, I'm pretty confident I'm going to make it to those 2 weeks. And they laughed. And they said, the house doesn't open for 2 weeks anyways. I'm like, there you go. So then I got there, I showed up for the grand opening and we all joked, hey, you made it. So it was almost exactly 2 years in recovery, 2 years sober, whatever, when I got my first paid gig in the field. And then the journey started from there to outreach case manager to what we now call peer recovery coach. And then fancy other titles were attached or taken away. And then here we are. Currently still a peer recovery coach, but now I have community specialist attachments as well. So, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've actually made it this long because both you and I know that we do have a lot of peers that have left the field because of some of the strain that working within the industry can have on the mind, body, and spirit. Tell me about some of the hardships. When we just were talking about this before we started talking on the podcast, but you said that you had a period of time where you had a really big burnout from the work.
Yes, it was 10 or so years ago. I was working in Washtenaw County. It was the beginning of what we would eventually call the opiate epidemic. No one was officially calling it yet. We were calling it the what the F is going on. That's what we were calling it. There was a point where we were going in and we were having our clinical meetings with all the staff, and our clinical director was naming more names of people that passed away. And it became really exhausting, and we weren't prepared. The DEA came to Washtenaw County really early in this whole thing, and it was national spotlight out of nowhere. And we were losing. This was not something to like, oh, we have coaches or MAT. It was like we were like bombarded. It was like a bomb went off. At the same time this is happening, I lost my father-in-law and my stepdad within the same year. So within the same year, I had lost two father figures. My biological father passed away when I was like in my 20s, so he died in 1999. And it brought back some what I thought was resolved grief, but some of that it was hiding back here. That took a toll. I had some physical issues with my hip and my right knee, and I wasn't able to do some of the things that I like doing, especially as a musician. I think it was actually me being a musician and a live performer, which was starting to wear and tear on my body and my brain. So all these things going on. While ironically enough, I was scheduled to do a presentation on burnout and compassion fatigue at the peer conference that year with a couple other members of different groups of peers, like peer specialists and peer mentors. I stopped laughing and telling jokes and being light and just certain things, and I couldn't see it. I literally could not see. I was just like a programmed drone, just kind of showing up to work, literally going through the motions, as they say. Didn't think anything was wrong because I couldn't see it. So one day, the CEO of this company, Home of New Vision, and my direct supervisor came in and they sat down and were like, we need to talk. And I was like, what's going on? And they said that you're not your usual self, something's wrong, and we want to talk about it. And I was not combative, but I was defensive, and very much someone in active addiction that isn't there yet up here. I'm fine. I was very much like that. And looking back on it, I was really amazed at my own temperament and my own attitude towards all this, because I'm turning into a client right now. I should be somebody's client right now. So I eventually became someone's client. They gave me time off to go figure some stuff out. And I had a lot of realizations to deal with, and a lot of pain to deal with. And it was rough. It was really rough. I did not relapse. I did not use. I didn't really have any thoughts of drinking or using drugs. I have a history of some self-harm, but really it was just numb. Just didn't want to do anything positive or negative. And I wasn't doing my physical therapy properly. Everything was just falling apart. And I went to a couple meetings that I hadn't been to in a while. I tried some new things. I went back to did some smart recovery meetings. I even went to a 12-step meeting. And I'm not a real big 12-step guy and haven't been for a really long time, but I'm not an anti-12-step guy. It just didn't seem really helpful to me anymore, personally. Professionally, I promote all the pathways. But I had to, like I said, if I were my coach, what would I say? And as a consumer or a client, what should I be doing? And that's exactly what I did. And I went back to physical therapy, followed the same rules that they tell everybody. Do this stuff at home. Do this stuff in your everyday life. You're not just going to get better by going to physical therapy and then going home and doing nothing. The same way You don't get better by going to residential treatment or outpatient therapy and then going home and doing nothing. So it was all this, oh wow, I should really practice what I preach, so to speak. And I eventually got this new traction, and I read a new outlook on how recovery is more than just the substance, right? The substance use is just really just a small part of it. I had no desire to burn out, right? And compassion fatigue and secondary trauma is, again, something that you don't know you're dealing with it until it's happening. And someone
Exactly.
usually has to
Yeah.
point it out to you.
Yes.
So I reached out. I remember reaching out to everybody. I reached out to you. I reached out to, and this, you might not even have known it at the time, but I was like, I need to go back to my roots and the people that were there in the beginning. Kevin McLaughlin, who was a huge influence on me early on and still is. And there was all kinds of people that I reached out to. And again, they might not have known it at the time. I might have just checked in with them. Some of them, I just blurted it all out and told them this is what's going on. And I became somebody's mentee. And some of these people were my mentors at one point or another, or we were considered compatriots, right? Equals, but it was, we all help each other out. And I think I just lost sight of that for a little bit. And then I realized that I knew my humor was back when I thought to myself, all this pain I'm going through, man, that's really going to make my workshop really kick ass now. And I remember laughing at myself. I was like, okay, there you go. I think I'm on the right track. Because and I told that to a few other people. And it's the kind of laugh where you laugh and you shake your head at the same time. That's one of my favorite types of humor, is where people are like, okay, that's messed up. But it's true. It actually helped my presentation because now I was able to do it and have real lived experience to compare it. Instead of just reading off a slide, I could say, hey, this happened to me. And
Yeah.
this is what I did to get through it. And it was not easy at all, but I did it.
Yep. Don't read off the slides, by the way. Anybody that wants to present, people can read. Yeah, your story is your testimony. So yeah.
The slides are a guide. That's all they are for the presenter.
Yes, absolutely.
There is a couple trainings that I do where you're required to read off the slides. And I just warn people ahead of time, just so you know. I don't normally do this in my other presentations, but the person that provides the funding for this
Yep.
asks us, please read off the slide. So,
Yep. But your story really hits home for me because I was like that last year. And it was like before all of this stuff happened with Serenity House, I too I was like a shell. And I had went on a walk with my husband and it's so nice to have you back. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I was completely checked out. And my signals are I don't play with the animals. I'm just going through the motions, like you said, and checking things off my list, right? Getting them done. And I too present on compassion fatigue, secondary trauma, or vicarious trauma and burnout. And when you find yourself, and it was like annually, I would go through these things. Once a year, I would start to get to that edge of burnout. But this time I was spending 10 years and then having the same issues come up and the same problem. And the recovery community stuff, it's still the Wild West, having just peers in one space. And I'm on the fence about having clinical with recovery supports. But I will say that there is a pro and a benefit of having clinical services in that realm, because when you're someone in recovery and you're experiencing burnout, I too didn't want to use, but often people do want to use and need somebody to talk to. And if it's right there and there's somebody who understands boundaries, emotional and mental boundaries with people who are in early recovery, it could be very beneficial. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell me about, we were talking earlier about the progression of recovery support services over the years. And I know this is something very important to you in terms of how things have changed.
Yeah, I remember when I first became a full-time employee at Home of Division, and I was outreach case manager. So I wasn't officially a peer yet. I was a case manager who also happened to be in recovery. And they said, You can share that information if you want, but you don't have to necessarily, because there is no sobriety requirement for these particular services. And I would work with all the other agencies, and I got to see how these other agencies operate. I knew nothing about any of this when I started. I really enjoyed service work as part of my 12-step program when I first got sober, and I really dived into it and I expanded on it and created new things. And I got an award from a local Delano club for all the service work that I did. And they're like, you should get in the field. I was like, I have no idea what you mean by that. I didn't know what a recovery tech was or a Milu tech or anything. So I was learning as I go, but I didn't like everything I was seeing out of the gate. I didn't like seeing agencies that like about completion rates, but yet they had a lot of reset rate at the same time. Like bragging about people that complete their program, but yet they're back in a week, sometimes less. So that was stored away up there. When I became a peer coach, I realized that a lot of the people that were either peer supports or some version of it, eventually I had to educate the companies that I worked for and say, we are peer recovery coaches. That is the correct title. Please make sure you get it right on the business cards and all that. And this is what we're not, and this is what we should be. Because early on, there were a lot of peers that were doing like clerical work. A lot of them were sitting in break rooms, not knowing what to do. Clinical staff didn't know, and I'm not saying this about home and new vision. I say like everybody. There was a lot of people, most agencies didn't know what to do with peers at first, because the peers weren't really sure what they were supposed to be doing based on their limited training, a week training, and then the certifications weren't in place yet. So everything got grandfathered in during my time when McBAP became a thing, way before MDHHS certification went through. We were still learning it as we go. Most of the peers that first run had a 12-step background, and most of them were 12-steppers. And if that was their only source of, if that was their only resource, then that's really what they were promoting. So a lot of the people that I worked with were paid 12-steppers, and that to me that didn't seem like a coach. Huge difference between myself, not just me, others, but what I saw, what I felt when I took that initial training was different than what a lot of other people were telling me, that it was this transformative experience. I didn't feel that during that initial C-card training. I felt solidified. I felt vindicated. I didn't feel like I transformed. I was told through this training that it's okay to think what you're thinking, because I didn't consider myself in a 12-step bubble. Not to knock other people, but a lot of them were. A lot of them really struggled in that training, and some of them came out the other side much more open-minded, much more equipped to be an actual peer recovery coach as opposed to a 12-stepper. And to this day, I still run into coaches that they do that training and it doesn't stick. It doesn't take. Something wears off after a while and they become very narrow in their approach, very narrow in their resources and their attitudes. Yeah, they might say, on the one hand, they might like MAT, or they'd say other groups are, but then they get alone with a client and they're like, yeah, don't buy into that. You need to get with God and get with 12 steps. And I know it happens. The people tell me, and I've talked to people one-on-one and they tell me. I'm an advocate for good peer recovery coaches. I'm an advocate I believe that not everyone should be a peer recovery coach. That might sound arrogant. I don't care. It is what it is. I've worked with a lot of great supervisors who are not peers. So I'm really careful when I say peers should be supervised by peers, because I believe that, but I also believe that in certain settings that might not be possible. Maybe a direct, like a team captain will be a peer, but there's a person with a clinical background who's the supervisor. And I've had good experiences with that and very bad experiences with people that just don't understand how peers operate and what their role is. And it can be incredibly frustrating, especially this long into the game. But it is nice to see that there has been a lot of good changes. There's been programs designed exactly around a peer recovery coach. Like I ran a mobile crisis intervention program at Hikera Health, where I still currently work. And that was like one of the first of its kind in Michigan, where we weren't with a clinical team. We were a peer team, most of the time solo, and driving to different hospitals, working with people, getting them signed up for services, and taking them where they need to go. and there wasn't a whole lot of meddling from clinical, unless it was a structure based on HR and quality management, and all that stuff had to be part of it. And I'm totally agreeing with that, because you also need to be a trained coach, but you also have to understand policy and procedures, and you have to understand how cars work, and you have to understand how computers work. I had to work with recruiters and hire people who do work with a lot of hiring, and remind them that people in recovery, especially if they only have a couple of years and they qualify to be a coach, they might not have the best resume in the world. And you need to let that slide, and let the people slide through, and at least let me or whoever's in charge of hiring the peers give them a chance. Because if they're in active addiction for a long time, their resume is going to look like shit. And they shouldn't be penalized for that
Yep.
when they come in and look for a job.
Yeah, so you talk about policies and procedures, and that was something that I really struggled with peers following policy and procedure. And I also experience a lot of boundary crossing. And that is something that, yes. What is your experience with this?
Unfortunate at times, because I would read the policy and procedure during a training, during the hiring process, and then I would try to get a little real as someone who understands boundaries are difficult when it comes to clinicians and then peers, because the lines are a little blurry, but they're still there. So I make it very clear: romantic relationships are not allowed. Hanging out after work, not allowed. I try to give as many examples as I can. And if there is a breach in that, I have to report it, because you could be endangering the sobriety and the life of a consumer. And that's following procedure for me. If you see something, say something. It's there for a reason. And again, not everyone that's in recovery, they could be sober 20 years, and doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to make a great peer recovery coach. Boundaries are so important, and unfortunately, they do get bent and broken. And yeah, I've been in the process of where I've had to report somebody to HR and let that process reach its inevitable end, with unfortunately more than one person who not just broke the boundaries, but shattered them and then stepped all over them. But then there are other incidents where things were reported to me that a client was attempting to cross boundaries, and I was able to intervene and give on the spot training, on the spot help to that peer, and help them get through something without themselves falling prey to, crossing a boundary. Because I believe, yeah, obviously, a lot of times it's a two-way street, but I also understand the fiduciary relationship between the peer and the consumer. Everybody should be protected. I certainly don't want a peer to be harassed by a consumer the same way I don't want a consumer to be harassed by a peer. We're not here for love. We're not here to hook up. We're not here to help somebody with their housing if that's not what I'm really designed to do. I believe that work phones should shut off at 5 o'clock. It's what's required of you. And I've called people on my team when they're not on. I think it was star 67, where they would just answer the phone, and I would be like, "Why are you on your phone?" Like, "Why do you keep calling me?" So then they would hang up and shut their phone off. So I was trying to be strict, because again, I experienced the same thing. When I was a case manager, I thought that if somebody called me, I should be there to console them at 7, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. And then I got caught, and they were like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, and they're like, "No, no, no." And case manager is pretty clear as day too. You're to help hook them up with other services. Although most of those services close at 5 o'clock. So your phone should be shut off, Chris. So it was told to me in those exact words. So it's okay, I got it.
Yep.
And in turn, I pass it on to the next group.
So, what does peer supervision look like for you as a peer supervisor?
Currently, I actually am not a peer supervisor, but I was and have been before. I was in charge of the mobile team, and then at one point I was in charge of almost all the peers through Hygira. During COVID, we kind of condensed the team, kind of had to, and we were all hunkering down at our residential program. It was definitely, there were a lot of learning moments for me as well as the team. And again, as a supervisor, I had to stay connected to my supervisor. I had to stay connected and make sure I am following what quality management is saying and making sure that we follow the ethics and the boundaries. And so we had our required training. We just did this recently. I suggested to the current supervisor that we go beyond what is expected by the state or the agency, and we add extra ethics and boundaries trainings slash discussions throughout the year, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, that we understand the things that are expected of us, the things that we should do, and we're trying to get a lot more blunt when it comes to the things that you're not supposed to do. So it was definitely a learning moment, especially during the interview process as well. Just when you're interviewing somebody that's never done anything like this in the past, you'd have to really ask some sometimes personal questions, or at least try to get them to share or at least think about what they're doing. So if I would tell somebody, hey, you're going to be working with males and females, and sometimes I would wait for a response because I don't want to cross any lines and ask questions that I may or may not be qualified to ask. Because again, I'm trying to not get myself in trouble or make the interviewee uncomfortable. If the person didn't have good experiences working with a certain population, then they would hopefully tell me either through verbal or nonverbal cues, right? I've had situations where people have hid things from the interview that came into light later, and it turns out a couple people discovered early that this is not for me. I'm going to go look for something else. Thank you so much. And I was like, great.
Yes.
I would prefer that over the other one, which is, oh, I have no idea what boundaries are, and I just totally created a debacle.
This is the thing too, is that's why working within a treatment setting with peers, because you have the policies and procedures are there, the backing, the large HR accountability structures. Working in a small RCO, there's very little of that. And I remember, and I had a woman that I had hired, and through the interview process, I asked her to tell me about her recovery. And she tells me she does yoga and she does all these things for recovery, and seemed great. So she shows up to work, and she was a supervisor, peer supervisor for a QRT, quick response team, a new grant that we had gotten last year. And one of my employees comes in and says, into my office, says, have you seen her? And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, you need to go take a look. And I go into her office, and her eyes are dilated and she's sweating bullets. And I'm like, are you okay? What's going on here? And I take a combination of Suboxone and Adderall. And I'm like, that's Matt. I'm like, when I asked you in the interview what your recovery pathway was, you didn't disclose that you were on Matt. And why didn't you tell us? And there was like this thing, and it was so borderline. Okay, we have to deal with the law, employment law, but we also have this woman that's not standing in her full truth or her core values about what her recovery pathway looks like. And those are the types of things that I kept encountering time after time with a smaller grassroots organization that was trying to become more professionalized. And that whole idea of professionalizing recovery support services, there has to be a level of professionalism in it. It can't just be willy-nilly. And I feel like we're moving in that direction. And like you had said, there's more certification, there's more accountability measures and all of that stuff. So it sounds to me that your path has been more of working within the treatment centers, because I know that in Washtenaw County, oh my gosh, Glynis's organization, their treatment and recovery support services.
I'm actually a founding member of RAP, Washtenaw Recovery Advocacy Project. And that whole process was conflicting for me at times because I was being sent to learn about RCOs when they were relatively new, right? And we were told that a lot of these trainings, you probably remember hearing this a lot too, is that it's supposed to be separate from treatment. They're supposed to be like maybe a fiduciary, helpful relationship to help them get off the ground, but then there has to be a separation. And from what I understand, that's not the case right now. It is a program of home division. So they're one and the same. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, because for all I know, that's needed to happen to keep rep going. But again, if we're being told one thing and then other things are happening that are completely out of our control, I guess the idea is that the influence from treatment is not supposed to infiltrate what happens at an RCO. So I understand that. But funding is another totally different thing. What they're doing amazing things at RAP. If I see any RCO that promotes smart recovery, they are cool in my book. And I know that's a pretty standard bar to hurdle, but that's where my base is. You got to promote multiple pathways. Don't just be an enhanced 12-step experience. You got to promote it all. I'm a board member of Recovery Action Network of Michigan, and I was a board member in the beginning, and then I had to step away. I applied to be the director, and I didn't get the director job. So then eventually they did ask me to come back and be a board member, and I'm an active board member, and I'm very proud of the work that they're doing. But they're connected to an agency called GrowthWorks, but that's currently for now, because that is, again, the fiduciary, like kind of startup plan for a lot of RCOs is attach themselves to an agency to help get them off the ground. And that still is one of our plans at RAN, is to eventually be a freestanding program able to work and sustain on its own without having the direct connection GrowthWorks. And that's going to take a while, and that's okay. Because I like both organizations, but I don't consider myself not really connected to GrowthWorks other than my relationship with RAN.
Yep. Yeah, and that seems to be like Detroit Recovery Project. They still have the RCO attached to, and there's been a lot of kind of talk about the funding, right? So they should be funding standalone RCOs, but until RCOs, and I'll just say, I've seen a lot of stuff within the RCO realm that is not in alignment, right? Not following core values. And yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see where the future, like how we move through recovery supports and the RCO work and what that's going to look like for sure. But yeah, so tell me more about your recovery and your healing process. So I know that you're a musician and you use your music to heal. And I know Smart Recovery and Recovery Dharma. And then you've tried AccuDetox with me and Reiki. So tell me what does your recovery look like?
There's a lot of comic books involved.
Okay.
Being just totally honest, one of my favorite things to do is sit outside and drink coffee and read comic books and escape. I love the ability to be able to do that. Still, it maybe harkens back to when I was a kid. I'm not sure, but I like a lot of that comic book nerdy stuff. I prefer DC over everything else, but I do all these other. I've really been getting into more independent comics of those smaller comic book companies. So that has been interesting to see. I like horror movie comics as well. So it's been a good exploration for that and finding new things and figuring out other things that I like and things that I don't. Fitness is still a big part of my life. I was raised by 2 gym teachers. I was a fitness instructor at one point. At one point, I worked at a fitness facility during the day and a bar at night. And it was a very strange life that I led for that time. But it was fun for the most part. And as far as going to meetings, honestly, I do not go to meetings on a regular basis as far as recovery support meetings. I haven't been to a 12-step meeting in a long time. I still talk to a lot of my old 12-step friends. There's a huge group of us that met in 08 and 09 that are still sober, and we've been through a lot. We went through our Al-Anon club having a horrible accident. The building next to it blew up, and this happened while I was working at the Home and New Vision. And a group of us went out and found our people and say, hey, we're going to meet here, we're going to meet there. We had this giant text threads we were bonded by, and we survived the opiate epidemic, so we were really attached to that. Having those people in my life still is very important. Yeah, music is a huge part of it. If it's not playing, it's listening. I love the fact that I can, on my phone, I can access pretty much anything. A song that pops in my head that I hadn't thought of since I was a kid, be like, I'm going to look that up. And chances are pretty good I'm going to get to listen to that song. And I might get to listen to 5 different cover versions of it as well, which is pretty cool. I like spending time with my wife, who is also in recovery and a therapist. She just graduated with her master's and she's got her first job as a counselor. So that's really great to see her start her journey in this wonderful field that she's already learned so much about just through me. And she's amazingly still wanted to be a therapist after watching me go through what I went through. But it's been great to be a part of that. My mom lives with us. We take care of my mom. That's a huge responsibility, but I take it as an honor because she was really, she was a great mom. And she helped me out when I first got sober. She let me come back home after a while when I was really struggling. And she didn't have to do that. So I do that. And that's my recovery plan. I have a therapist. I got to point that out. I continued. So going back to the original story of my burnout and my compassion fatigueness, I had to bounce from one therapist to another when I switched from Home of New Vision to High And there was a low transportation issue with just, I can't run this program and be able to drive all the way over. Zoom was not a thing, really. Telehealth therapy wasn't really a thing. And so I got so busy with my new job as a program coordinator, I started to burn out again a little bit. And my boss said, did you sign up for therapy yet since you worked at High? And I said, no. And I told him I would, and I didn't. And he goes, okay, go home early, call somebody in, call the number on the back of your insurance card, get it done, get it started. And I did. And I ended up getting a new therapist who I've been seeing for years now, and he is great. We do a lot of walking and talking, which is very cool. We live, obviously, in Michigan. You don't get to always do that, but he loves hiking. He loves being in nature, which is cool because I like hiking, kayaking, all that stuff too. So I can relate to him on some other things, and he challenges me when I need to be challenged, when I'm just going to give him, hey, this is what's going on. No, nothing major. So it's good to have that clinical connection too. And he's there. He's a tool that when I need it, I know where it is. I still, like I tell my clients that I work with, it's good to check in on some of these resources and tools so that way when you really need them, they're there. They're within arm's reach. You don't have to go in your brain looking through a Rolodex or whatever. I know I'm dated myself because I just said the word Rolodex, but
yes, I still use it too.
Might not know what that is. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm happy with my recovery today. I talk about recovery a lot at work, obviously. So sometimes the last thing I want to do when I get home is talk about recovery more.
Yeah.
I need a little bit of a break. I need some food. I need to go do something fun and practice what I preach, right? So I was struggling with that before. So yeah, if that means I gotta get ready, hurry up and eat because I got band rehearsal, or if I get to watch Wheel of Fortune with Mom at dinner and then I gotta do chores or go work out or whatever, it's
Yes.
happy. I like those things. I like that program.
And that's living your life. And that's getting your living day to day life. And that life isn't about going to meetings and being chained to that table. Once you have your time, time, that's what I tell people is go find other pathways. Go open your mind and your heart to other ways. For me, I'm at the gym 4 days a week. And if I'm not at the gym, then I'm walking and I'm watching what I eat. And that's my recovery. That's where I'm at right now. And I too haven't been to a meeting. It's been probably about 3 years. And I went after a few years before not going to a meditation. It was a meditation, 12-step meditation meeting. And I don't need meetings. I have my community in other aspects, but I'm living life, like my family, my garden, and I too have lost the obsession. So I don't have any of those thoughts or even the desire to go back and be in that state that I was many years ago. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. And it's everything that we picked up is still with us, right? All that knowledge that I picked up from all the different meetings. I know how to meditate, and I know I have a very good grasp of mindfulness techniques. I have many smart recovery acronyms memorized. I went through the steps several times over and over again, and the traditions. So these things are part of me. If I need a refresher course, believe me, I'll go do it. If I feel like I need to go to a meeting or whatever, I'll do it. I just haven't gotten to that point yet. I have other things ahead of it. I have tools that I will use. And believe me, after what I went through, it's quite a few years ago now, but I got to relive it again because almost on I think it was like the 10th anniversary of that first time I did the burnout and compassion fatigue workshop. I got to do it again at the Peer Conference this last year, and it was packed. I had a great peer support specialist who I've known for a long time, Deb Monroe, who was a co-facilitator, and another gentleman who I just met that day was representing peer mentors who are individuals who are either cognitively or physically disabled. And he was great too. And everyone loved the whole presentation. It was amazing. So we had these 3 different peer perspectives represented, and it was packed. Even the back of the area where it's standing room only, that was packed. I don't know if I've ever been in a room that packed before. So that's a good feeling. And then buzz gets created. And so then people that run the conference want to hear more about the workshop that they couldn't get into. So it was a great feeling. It brought up a lot of that history, but that's all it was. It was history that I was able to reflect on. It's like I tell my clients, there's a big difference between reflection and dwelling.
Yes.
Right?
It's all perfect. Yes. And it's all supposed to be lesson and learning. And the greater the failure, the more opportunity to build something that's more in alignment with who you are and to show up more in alignment with the people too. A lot of our lessons are who are the types of people I want to surround myself with, and what type of life do I want to live. And yeah, I don't believe that too, that failure is meant to be dwelled in a lot of people. And I will say too, resilience is such a huge component too of what we do, and to be able to, and that's my testimony is my own healing journey and my recovery is that with what happened last year, I was able to recover when I've met people, it took years for them to recover from that kind of rupture. And I was able to do it in less than a year, probably 7 months. And that's the gifts of recovery and healing. That is the gift of learning yourself and healing yourself and walking the path. But I'm going to say, Chris, is that you are a bona fide peer recovery coach that truly encompasses multiple pathways, truly. And I will say that, yes, and you are you're an anomaly. And that's the thing, is that you practice what you preach, and that's why I adore you, because you do have core values, and one of them is one that has become very important to me, and I didn't realize how important it was until last year, but loyalty. And the people that are in my tribe, essentially, and that I know that resonate with the same core values and that really have good hearts still. They have not let life poison their hearts, and golden hearted. And those are the types of people that I want to surround myself with. And I'm glad you're one of those people. And I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you for inviting me. I was hoping I'd get to do this with you. I appreciate everything you just said too. That it's really nice to hear, and I do appreciate you. I remember watching the videos of you with a sledgehammer demoing the first Serenity House building and creating it, and you're doing the things that I at the time wanted to do, and I never like pulled the trigger on anything. Had opportunities provided, had opportunities taken away, but there are also times that I just never pulled the trigger on it. I always admire anybody that is able to pull the trigger like you did. So I always appreciate that. I appreciate your friendship as well, and your exposure too. I was not into. I always forget the terminology to it. Reiki and a lot of the holistic methods. I wasn't anti-holistic. I would promote it too. I learned from a training. I'd say put a W in front of it, so it's like the whole person. And it's whole this and oh, that's clever. And I would say that to clients, and they would be like, yeah, that actually makes sense. And they'd be like, what are some other things you could do? And I'd be like, I don't know, because we didn't really get that down where we were at. So to be exposed to Reiki, to be exposed to the acupressure was such a great experience, because then I have new lived experience to share, and I'm happy that we get the opportunity to do that. Like I don't have to drive to Flint to experience that. It's happening. It's starting to be more readily available in other places.
In other
Appreciate it.
place. Yeah, thank you. And I'll just say too, one thing as we're talking about this is that through some of the lessons that I've had, I don't believe that holistic is meant for people who are in early recovery. I believe it's meant for somebody who has a pretty good amount of time in their recovery to be able to go deeper into the things that they need to look at. And that is part of the problems that I kept encountering, is that it was mandatory that you got trained as a coach in AccuDetox and Reiki, and these people were not ready for it. And that was one of the biggest things where I think that the things that I teach and that I know, like EFT, Reiki, and the AccuDetox, acupressure, those are for either clinicians, people with long-term healing practices in place, or peers who have at least 5 years or more in place for that kind of level of healing.
Yeah, I find that interesting that you said that, because I've recently been talking to folks about the 2-year minimum for peer recovery coaches, and I think some programs might need to look at that differently and might have to have maybe a 5-year requirement for it. Some people just aren't ready for the environment, the impact. There's a big difference between crisis intervention or rapid response teams and peers and working in emergency rooms. Oh my, that's all very jarring. And even someone that's used to working with like a gender familiar to their own, like a woman who's used to working with women in 12-step meetings and things, and becomes a coach, and then they're thrown into a co-ed program, that can be jarring. That's not always meant. Now that person can work through it and work with the supervisor and work with themselves to eventually be able to adapt better. But like I said earlier, sometimes people give it a shot and they say, this particular program is not for me, not right now.
Yep.
So it's a pretty profound thing that we're talking about, especially since we were both pulled into everything so quickly the way we were, like all these new things. Hey, let's go do it. Let's do this, and let's take this training, and let's do that. And I often look and see, like, I can't believe I made it through all this. So many changes, so many attitude changes towards, we still need a lot of work out in the community in general and the recovery community as far as like attitudes towards certain things. But I think we've made a lot of progress too. And I think that we need to have conversations like that. Who is ready for what we're about to throw them into? And we're responsible for it just as well.
Yep.
We're responsible
Yep.
for it.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, we're talking about this. I just recently did a Foundations of Recovery Reiki for peers in New Jersey. And I trained 13 peers in the concepts of shadow work, which is taking a look at all your traumas and starting to unpack all that stuff that you don't want to talk, that you're that you really need a support system. And that was the requirement. And I told New Jersey, I was like, you guys they have to have a support, a strong recovery and support. And only two of them moved through the foundations concepts to be able to move through the level 1 and the level 2. So 2 peers out of 12, 13. So that told me a lot of what I needed to know about holistic medicine and peers if they're ready. And they loved it. My feedback on my scores were very high, but they started opening the doors to those places in the mind that they didn't fully understand. You don't understand it until you go through it, just like we talked about the burnout and compassion fatigue. Yep, you're there and you're experiencing it, and it's whoa. And I too am getting better at spotting the signs, but it still is a process. This whole healing recovery journey is just one big long process that's really never ending. So, but yeah, we're coming to the end of our time together. Is there anything that you would like to say to someone who's listening who maybe wants to become a peer or who is a peer?
Yeah, if you want to become a peer, I would definitely look into it. Find your nearest agency and has peers, and look into it and talk to them. If you're in early recovery and you're interested in learning about multiple pathways, do some research. Go look into it. Ask around. The best coaches are the ones that are the most equipped. And that means that you're going to have to go outside of your comfort zone and stay there for a little bit. You're going to have to see where your boundaries are at, what your comfort levels are at. You don't need to switch loyalties for your program either. That's a big misconception. So when I tell people, I need you to learn about smart recovery and have basic knowledge of what it is, I've never said I need you to stop going to 12-step meetings and start going to SMART exclusively. Never said that. I never would. Oftentimes when people go to these meetings, they find them helpful, and then they're reminded, yeah, I could do this every once in a while. I could do a Dharma meeting, and then I could do this. I've been having actually a lot of luck lately with Women for Sobriety and promoting that to a couple clients, and they love it. And I only know from what I've read and talked to, so that's because I don't go to those meetings, and I'm not going to try. It is definitely learning about new meetings as they pop out. I'm a big fan of Sober Faction, which is run by the Satanic Temple. I'm a big fan of all the different types of MAT. Like you say the words MAT and it just means something totally different nowadays than when it did when you and I were first starting out, right? Because it was like methadone and Suboxone and that's it. And
now what is it?
Now it's like an endless list of things that people could be doing to help their recovery.
Like marijuana.
It needs to be customized and individualized. That everyone's recovery plan is their own recovery plan, and it's not theirs. It's not their sponsors. It's not their coaches. It's not their therapist. They need to figure out what they like, and when you get your time in, you get to branch out and do other things. It is really like a balance that you have to figure out, and that's why I love it when coaches are able to just show the path. Give some information, and it's okay to give some advice every once in a while. You hear information. If they're someone that really struggles with religion or religious groups or spirituality, then they need to be on maybe a secular path before they figure some of that stuff out.
Yep.
It's not like we're going to tell them that you need to wait or you need to just do it, suck it up. There's ways to go about it, and there's ways to not. So, if you're looking into becoming a coach, go find a coach and talk to them. If you're looking to get into the biz, don't do it for the money. Know that, because that's not a good idea. I've been able to sustain a life in this field where, I don't have to work 5 other side hustles to pay my house payment. I'm able to maintain a good living.
Chris,
Took me a while to get that way, but I appreciate the question. Appreciate the time, Tara.
Yes. I'm excited to get this out. I think we need more people like you in the industry. And I would love one day for you to come to work for the Recovery Alliance Project. That would be like one of my dreams if we just lived closer together. So But yeah, there's going to be more opportunities definitely to see each other and work together for your gigs soon. So
Appreciate
yes,
that.
so thank you so much, yes, for spending time with me.
Thanks again for the invite. Love you.
Okay. Yeah, I love you too. This was good.